If you want to hear more terrifying stories, please like, comment, and subscribe to Terrifyingly Haunted. This is why you should never sleep through footprints. It's a lesson the people of South Devon learned on a bitter winter morning in 1855. A lesson written in the snow, in a language no one could read. When the sun rose on Friday, February 9th, it revealed a world transformed, not just by the heavy, silencing blanket of snow that had fallen through the night, but by a single, impossible trail. A trail that would stretch for nearly 100 miles and would come to be known by only one name. They called it the Devil's Footprints, and for over a century and a half, no one has been able to prove they were wrong. This is the story of what walked through Devon that night. A story of mass hysteria, scientific inquiry, and a mystery that chills to the bone. The winter of 1855 was brutal. A great frost had seized Britain, and for weeks, temperatures remained stubbornly below freezing. The night of February 8th was the coldest yet, a deep, penetrating cold that drove everyone indoors, bolting their doors against the wind and the driving snow. From the coastal towns of Exmouth and Teignmouth, inland across the rolling hills and frozen fields, the snow fell without pause. It laid a pristine, 12-inch deep sheet over the county of Devon, erasing roads, burying fences, and silencing the world. It was a perfect, untouched canvas. And upon this canvas, something, or someone, decided to walk. The first to see the tracks were the early risers, labourers heading to the fields, bakers firing their ovens, servants fetching water. They emerged from their homes into a world of white, and there they were. A single, unwavering line of marks, as if placed by a surveyor's chain. The prints themselves were bizarre. Most witnesses described them as being shaped like a small hoof, or a U-shape, as if made by a miniature donkey or pony. Others saw the mark of a cloven hoof, the unmistakable sign of the biblical devil. They were small, only about 4 inches long and just under 3 inches wide. But it was their placement that defied all logic. They were laid out in a perfect single file, one directly in front of the other. The stride was a consistent 8 to 9 inches, an impossibly short step for any four-legged animal. It suggested a creature walking on 2 legs, placing one foot precisely before the next. And the path they took was utterly mad. The trail walked straight over obstacles as if they weren't there. It went up to 14-foot-high walls, continued on the other side without a break, and reappeared on snowy rooftops, only to descend on the far side. In one village, the prints led up to a haystack and continued from the very top. In another, they appeared to enter and exit a drainpipe only 4 inches in diameter. They crossed the wide, frozen expanse of the River Exe. They marched through enclosed courtyards and walled gardens, with no apparent way in or out. As the day wore on and news travelled, the scale of the phenomenon became terrifyingly clear. The tracks were not a local anomaly. Reports flooded in from over 30 different locations across South and East Devon, from Topsham to Teignmouth, from Lympstone to Totnes. When plotted on a map, the trail appeared to cover a distance of between 40 and 100 miles, all seemingly traversed in a single night. The line wasn't perfectly continuous, of course. There were gaps over ploughed fields or windswept plains where the snow hadn't settled. But the consistency of the reports from village to village painted a picture of one continuous, extraordinary journey. By midday, curiosity had curdled into fear. If this was an animal, it was one unknown to science and possessed of unnatural abilities. If it was a prank, it was one of impossible scale and complexity. The third option was the one whispered in hushed tones in pubs and parlours. Panic began to set in. Men armed themselves with pitchforks and old muskets, forming search parties to hunt the creature. The local clergy, including the Reverend G.M. Musgrave of Withycombe Raleigh, took a keen interest, documenting the accounts of his parishioners. He noted the universal alarm and the deep-seated belief that this was a supernatural visitation. Satan himself, some said, had come to check on his flock. The national press caught wind of the story, and correspondents were dispatched to Devon. Newspapers like the Illustrated London News and The Times published sensational accounts, turning a local mystery into a national obsession. The story of the Great Devon Mystery was out. With national attention came a flood of theories. The educated men of the era felt compelled to provide a rational explanation to quell the superstitious fears of the populace. The first and most obvious culprits were animals. Could it be a badger? Perhaps, but a badger would have left a trough from its body dragging in deep snow, and it certainly couldn't walk through a 4-inch pipe. What about birds? A hopping bird could explain the single-file pattern, but no bird could travel 100 miles in one night, and their prints looked nothing like a hoof. Otters or rats were suggested, but again, the path over high walls and rooftops made this impossible. A rumour even circulated that a kangaroo had escaped from a private menagerie in Sidmouth, but this was quickly debunked. More complex theories emerged. One popular idea, championed by the naturalist Richard Owen, was a thaw and refreeze effect. Perhaps a common animal, like a wood mouse, had hopped across the snow, and the subsequent melting and refreezing of the prints distorted them into their strange hoof-like shape. This could explain the shape, but not the impossible path. Then came the truly inventive explanations. One gentleman proposed that an experimental hot air balloon had accidentally been released from Devonport, its mooring shackles dragging across the countryside, creating the marks. A clever idea, but it strains credulity to imagine a balloon navigating such a precise and complex path through villages and over rooftops for 100 miles. And what of a hoax? Could a group of pranksters have worked all night with heated, hoof-shaped brands on long poles to create the trail? The sheer scale, the distance covered, and the need for perfect coordination in the dead of a freezing night make this perhaps the most unlikely theory of all. It would have been a logistical nightmare. In the end, every rational explanation failed. For every argument in favor of a badger or a balloon, there was a counter-argument from the tracks themselves. The single file, the impossible obstacles, the sheer distance. The mystery wasn't just the prints, it was the story they told. A story that resonated deeply with the Victorian psyche, a society caught between the rise of science and the persistence of faith, between the rational and the supernatural. The newspapers, eager for a story, amplified the fear and the folklore. They printed lurid woodcuts of a horned devil stalking through the snow, reinforcing the public's darkest suspicions. For many, it was simpler to believe in one impossible thing, the devil, than in a dozen improbable things that failed to explain the evidence. The footprints became a moral litmus test, a line in the snow between belief and skepticism. And then, as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. A thaw set in a few days later. The pristine snow turned to slush, and the evidence melted away. The perfect, impossible trail was erased from the landscape. Whatever crossed Devon left no body. It made no sound. It left only a path and a story. The prints melted. The snow forgot. But the story didn't. It has been debated and analysed for over 160 years. There have been other, less famous reports of similar phenomena, from Scotland in 1840 to Poland in 2009, but none with the sheer scale and wealth of documentation as the Devon incident. Modern investigators are left with the same conflicting accounts, the same lack of physical evidence, and the same unsettling questions. We are no closer to a definitive answer today than the terrified villagers were on that February morning. The mystery endures because it is perfect. It presents us with a set of facts that simply cannot coexist in our rational world. It's a reminder that sometimes the world is stranger than our explanations for it. That on a cold winter's night, things can pass through our well-ordered lives, leaving behind just enough evidence to trouble our sleep. Some things don't knock. They just make sure you know they were there.